Good morning and welcome to the Pastor J podcast. I'm Pastor Julius Stevens. I'm a little couple of minutes late. I apologize for that. It's Thursday, February 26th. Man, February's already gone. 2026. I hope all is well with you and your family, and that you're safe and things are going well with your life. And I want you to continue to believe God that all things are working together for your good, in spite of how they look, that your faith and patience is going to get you through. Well, I got an exciting lesson for you today. We're going to talk about spiritual blindness. Not physical blindness, but spiritual blindness, because that's one of the things that Jesus, when he came to earth, he wanted to open our eyes to see some things, a lot of things that were right in front of us. And so we want to take a look at that today. But as always, I want you to subscribe to the Pastor J podcast. Uh, you are really blessing me, those of you that have subscribed. If you're watching me on a different platform other than YouTube, or if you're watching on YouTube, you would really bless me by subscribing to our channel. We're building this channel one subscriber at a time, and we just welcome you to our digital community. Well, like I said, today we're going to talk about spiritual blindness, and we're going to get right into it. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you and praise you for another day that you have made. I thank you and praise you that the eyes of my understanding be enlightened, that I may know the hope of your calling. Father, let something be said today to cause us to think, to stimulate our thinking, to look at things differently, to understand think differently, and to come closer to your understanding of things. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Again, we're talking about spiritual blindness. You know, one of the most dangerous people that you'll find when it comes to the things of God is a person that says, I can only see my point of view. The way I see it is the way it is. The way I understand it is the only way to understand it. And even if you go back and you look at the Bible, you'll find that the Bible is full of opinions about a whole bunch of things. Why? Because it was written by humans, and humans have their understanding. I believe the false narrative, and I believe it's something that no Christian, no honest Christian can prove, is that the Bible does that the Bible is infallible, that the Bible has no contradictions. There's no way you can prove that the Bible has no contradiction unless you twist and turn, because the Bible is basically written, some say 1,500 years, some say 1,000 years, over that period of time. And what they're writing about are their lived experiences and how they understood their lived experiences. They wrote them down, and what one person called God, uh, say in the first century, and what another person experienced that they call God in the second. I'm talking about the 1,000 to the 1,500 years that they wrote the Bible. During that 1,500 year span, man, people saw God in all kinds of ways, doing all sorts of things, and then they wrote them down. And what we do here in 2026 is that we have to go to the Bible and look at their lived experiences and look at what they did and say, well, yeah, they did it that way, they saw it that way, but it doesn't apply to me. For example, one of the things that are in the Bible is that under the Old Testament says that if you rape a woman, listen carefully, if you rape a woman, you have to marry her. That's in the Bible. That's written as it is, because that's what the Jews believe, that if you violate somebody, then she's yours. Why? Because women were seen as property. Women were seen as property. So if you rape a woman, you own her now, and you have to marry her. So a woman has to marry her rapist. That's written in the Bible. Well, what apologists do, come back and say, well, that's not the way it really was. That was the way it was. Because they're saying that nobody heard from God could ever do that. Well, again, maybe these people were blind. Maybe these people did not see things as well as they should in their understanding of God. Surely God would never tell somebody to rape somebody, but yet they did it. And they said, if you do it, you're going to have to marry her because she was seen as property. The whole idea of a woman as chattel or property. That was the way that they saw God, that God saw women as something for men to own. And that's the way they treated women. So again, we have to open our eyes to things and go inside the Bible and say, well, yeah, that's the way they did it. And they believed that they were doing it God's way, but not me. I see something totally different. And then we have to respect our different points of view. I mean, we have well over 35,000 different Christian denominations, and all of them are built on a different point of view of God. I pulled this up off the internet and I thought it was pretty interesting. And it may not as be as historically accurate. I didn't really research it, so if I say some things that aren't historically accurate, please send me a note and correct me on it. I did not thoroughly research this, but I thought it was pretty close to way it happened. And we know that Constantine organized what we call the Christian church. Again, we're talking about spiritual blindness. And they said that this is the universal church. This is the church that hears from God. And then what happened was Martin Luther didn't like the Catholic Church, didn't like some of the things that the Catholic Church did, put his theses on the door of the church, and of course ran for his life. And he started what we call the Lutheran Church, or the protest movement, or the Protestant movement. We have Catholics in Christianity, we have Catholics, and we have Protestants, because they were protesting against the Catholic Church and saying that they are blind. We see God, they are blind. And then after that, Calvin did not like the Lutheran Church and founded the Reformed Calvinist Church. Henry VIII was upset at the Catholic Church because they wouldn't let him get rid of his wife and remarry another woman. So he was king of England. And so he decided, shoot, I'll start my own church. If the Catholic Church won't honor me, I'll start my own church, and I'll call that the Anglican Church. John Smith didn't like the Anglican Church and founded what we call the Baptist Church. William Miller didn't like the Baptist Church and founded the Adventist movement. Ellen G. White, she liked what William Miller was teaching, and she founded the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Charles T. Russell didn't like the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He founded the Jehovah's Witness. Joseph Smith didn't like the Methodist Church, and he founded what we call the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church. John Wesley didn't like the Anglican Church and founded the Methodist Church. Some pastors did not like the Methodist Church, and out of the Azusa Street revival, they started what we call the Pentecostal church. And the Pentecostal church has a lot of different churches that come out of the Pentecostal church, like the Assemblies of God, the Disciples of Christ, our apostolic different churches. They come out of all of that. Why? Because they all saw God clearly. Clearly, they did not all see God clearly. And then you had what we call the evangelical movement. A lot of this came out of Jerry Falwell and Paul Weyrich, as the government was forcing, during the civil rights movement, when the government was forcing integration. And it looks like the government is going to force black kids to be allowed to go to school with white kids. Jerry Falwell, he started, and Paul Weyrich, they said that we have to start a political movement now where we regain the power in the government, and they needed an issue. Give me an issue that we could get white evangelicals behind so that we can gain power in the government, so that we could get our agenda passed. And they found it in abortion. They couldn't come out and say, well, we don't like black people, and we don't want our kids going to school with black people, but we've got to find a way to get power so that we can make rules like currently today, getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and getting rid of things what am I trying to say? Giving things like quota systems and getting rid of things like that that give minorities an equal opportunity. They're not lowering standards. Nobody's asking you to lower our standards for lawyers or doctors or pilots or anybody. So just give us an opportunity to take the test. That's all they were saying. Just give us affirmative action. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, all these things. And so all of this is a Christian backlash to make sure that, again, blacks not get equal opportunity in the church, not in the church, in the government. All of this came out of the church. All of this, and now you have the white nationalist movement that is so big, that's behind our current president. All of these things are Christians. And all of them claim that they see God clearly. All of them claim that they understand God clearly. And while at the same time, they all disagree. So we're going to take a look at that. And hopefully, Paul prayed this prayer over in the book of Ephesians. And I like this prayer over in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 17 through 23, because, there's nothing new under the sun. People have been fussing and fighting over their understanding of God since the beginning of humans. That we've looked up in the sky and imagine that everything is controlled by God, or in ancient times many gods. Okay, and so we all come up with our ideas and our opinions about God. But Paul prayed this in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 17 through 23. He said, the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, that he's praying this prayer, the Father of glory, may give unto us the spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. The eyes of our understanding be enlightened, that ye may know what is the hope of his calling, and what the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints, and what is the exceeding. Paul is praying that we find these things out. And what is the exceeding greatness of his power to usward who believe, according to the working of his mighty power, which he wrought in Christ, when he raised him from the dead and set him on his own right hand in the heavenly places, far above all principality and power and might and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in this world, but also in that which is to come, and hath put all things under his feet, and gave him to be the head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him that filleth all in all. Paul prayed that the eyes of our understanding be enlightened, that we begin to see things through a different lens, that we begin to understand things differently. Because the last thing that I know that Jesus Christ wanted was that his body would be divided, and that his body would be in a place of disarray and disagreement, and everybody's fussing and fighting and clawing and saying, I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm right and you're wrong. What is spiritual blindness? Blindness. Let's look at this as a definition, so that a working definition, so that we all can be on the same page. It's the inability or unwillingness to perceive or understand spiritual truths that come from God, that can be implied to make all human lives better. We're blind to the fact that we should be sharing things that are going to make all lives better. Not just me and my group, that we're looking for a way. I talked a few weeks ago about spiritual superiority, how that there are a lot of Christians out there who think that giving their life to Christ makes them superior over people. When actuality, I believe that if you follow Jesus Christ, you will get a revelation and an understanding that we're just like people, not superior to people, but our eyes are open to the fact that I'm no different than you. I have the same issues that you have. I understand that the same the sun that comes on me is kind of like in the book of Matthew, where it says the sun shines on the just and the unjust, that the same sun that's shining on you is shining on me. And the same challenges that you have are the same challenges that I have, or the same devil that you face is the same devil that I face, that we're just alike. We're just alike. And how can we take our likeness to navigate through this world so that we all can live a better life? So that was the whole crux of the teachings of Jesus Christ, was that I'm here for everybody to have a better life, for everybody to be loved, for everybody to have joy and peace and patience and long suffering and gentleness and goodness, for so that everybody can prosper, so that no one can go without. Jesus said, that is what I want my followers to teach people, to love one another the way that I have loved you. But we over time have become blind to this, as we fight for superiority, as we fight for who's right and who's wrong, and that the way I see it is the right way to see it, and that if you see it any different from me, that you're wrong, that it's either my way or the highway. And that's the way we've come. And what did we end up with? The song said, when I was growing up, a ball of confusion. And it was singing, I think that was the Temptations singing, it's a ball of confusion. That's what the world is today. And they could have easily said a ball of confusion. That's what the church is today. And so we have to open our eyes, because I believe that if what you're doing that represent God is not making you a better person, and not trying to make the lives of others that you come in contact to live a better life, what are you doing? And why are you doing it? If your beliefs in God is not to improve your life, and then to improve the lives of your family, and to improve the lives of your community, if it's not going to improve that, what is the alternative? Is to make everything worse? Is that the goal, is to make things worse? Well, if you look at the teachings of Jesus, Jesus was constantly talking about open your eyes so that you can see. The encounter that he had with John the Baptist, I'm sorry, with Nicodemus, over in the book of John chapter 3. We've talked about this on many occasions, where Nicodemus came to him by night and says, I know you must be a man from God. Nicodemus talking to Jesus and says, because no man can do what you do except God be with him. I recognize the God on you and how God is working through you. And he says, you must be born again. And then he said, and then you can see how we do things in the kingdom. And what is this transformation? This transformation starts with the way you think. Paul said it over in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, but that you be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. In other words, your mind has got to go through a transformation, that you have to go to a new way of thinking. And that new way of thinking will cause you to see things differently. And Jesus is telling Nicodemus in this encounter that until you change the way that you think, you can't see what I'm doing. You'll never understand what I'm doing. And Jesus used the term born again, that you must be born again. And what he was talking about, your thinking has to undergo a complete way of thinking. And Jesus' whole ministry was about teaching people how to see things differently. He said, see everybody as important. He used the illustration of a herd of sheep. He says, now, if one sheep go astray, you have to give that one sheep just as much value as the other 99. If you had 100 sheep and one goes astray, leave the 99 who are okay, because that one that left is just as valuable as the other 9. Don't throw them away. Go get them. Why? Because I want you to see things differently. Even in the even in the thing in the, as Jesus taught, these different stories are just coming to me. They're not in my notes. But Jesus was teaching on another occasion, and he was trying to teach them about how to treat people. And he used the story of the prodigal son over in Luke chapter 15. And he says, okay, this guy went out and he wasted all of his money and he wasted everything that he had. And then he came to himself and he said, I will arise and go back to my father. And Jesus said, you don't reject him when he comes back. You accept him back and you treat him like he never left. That was a new way of thinking. Jesus tells the story, what we call the Good Samaritan, where he says a guy went down to Jericho, or was on his way down to Jericho, and he fell among thieves, and these guys beat him up and left him for dead. And he says, now watch, the religious people, the Jews, the Levites, and they went to the other side of the street and didn't want to deal with this person. But then a Samaritan who is basically hated by the Jews, and the Jews saw themselves as superior to this person, to the Samaritan, says the Samaritan had mercy and compassion on him. Jesus was really dealing with a question where Jesus, in the story of the Good Samaritan, all of it started with a question when they asked Jesus, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus said, the greatest commandment in the law is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as or equal to the way that you love yourself. He says, love your neighbor equal to the way that you love yourself. Treat your neighbor the way you would want to be treated if you found yourself in the same situation. And so they asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus said, well, I'll tell you, let me see if I can illustrate this in the story. And then he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And they said, well, which one was my neighbor? Well, who is, they still, even after Jesus told them the story of the Good Samaritan, they were like, well, who is my neighbor? He said, the one that showed this person mercy. Anytime you show someone mercy and compassion, which are expressions of love, anybody that you do that, that's your neighbor. In other words, Jesus was saying, all humans are your neighbors. But you got to have your mind open. Again, what is born again? It's a transformation of the mind. It's looking at things differently. It's seeing things differently. It's asking God to show you things differently. Another one here that I want to talk about as far as what God showed, you'll find this over in Matthew chapter 16, when Jesus is explaining how he would establish the church. And over in Matthew chapter 16, verse 13, Jesus is teaching his disciples. You know, life is always teaching. One thing that I've learned to understand about life is that life is always, number one, life is always lifing. I like that expression, that life is always lifing. And number two, life is always teaching. The question is, will you learn the lesson? Would you learn the lesson? Even when things in life that we lose because of bad decisions or circumstances beyond our control, we might lose some things, but did you learn the lesson from the loss? There's something to be learned from the loss. And it's one thing that I can say about the word of God is that it's always teaching. It's always teaching. It's always giving us a fresh perspective, a new way of looking at things. Even all the churches that have developed since the Catholic Church, the 35,000 different Christian denominations. Now, a lot of them were born out of frustration with the church because somebody said, I see something that this church don't see, and they won't accept. And a lot of times the church, when you, in a lot of churches, when you begin to see things differently and it doesn't agree with the current beliefs of the church, well, then you're going to have to move. And what they end up doing is starting their own organization. Even as parents, let me say this, your children will not have the same relationship with God that you have. They're going to believe things differently than you. I did it with my parents. Most of the people, I'm a baby boomer. Most of the baby boomers that I know that are committed to the things of God, they don't practice their religion or practice what they believe about God the same way. They don't sing the same songs. They don't preach the same sermons. They see things differently. Well, the generation behind me, they're going to see things differently than us. They're going as right as we think we are, as much as we think we understand God. The generations behind my children and my grandchildren, they'll one day say, this is what daddy generations believe. We don't quite see it that way. And then my grandchildren will say, "Oh, this is what the old folks used to say," and they talking about me. They'll be saying, "This is what the old folks used to say. This is what they did not understand about God." Why? Because knowledge is progressive and they should understand things. I'm not mad at them for that. They should have a better understanding of God than we do. Why? Because it's progressive. We should be able to see the Bible cannot be the final authority in our lives. The Bible has to be sacred, but it cannot be sovereign. Why? Because those people that saw God 2,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago. We've come a long way since then. We're not going. We're not going to beat and kill somebody because take somebody's life because they pick up sticks on the Sabbath day like they did back then. We're not going to do that. We're not choosing husbands for our children, and we're not choosing husbands for our daughters. We want the relationship to be, it's not a arrangement, it's not a financial arrangement, which a lot of those marriages were. It's two people that love each other. We cannot look at the Bible and say that's why I'm off topic. I'll be back in a minute. But that's why the Bible has to be negotiated. You have to go into that Bible and say, what can I use for me today in 2026? The way that they use it 3,500 years ago. And if it's non-applicable to my life, I'm not using it. Well, the Bible, I read it too. I read it too, but I have a better understanding of of God than they did when they wrote that in the Bible. But again, we have Bible worshipers, not God worshipers. And the people that are Bible worshipers, they only use it for what they believe. And what they don't believe, they discard it. I get it. I understand it because we all do it because there's no way anybody can apply the whole Bible to their lives because it's constantly showing you different perspectives. And a lot of those perspectives, you say, there is no way I can live like that. There is no way I can treat my wife the way those men treated their wives. Under the Old Testament, a woman didn't even have the right to divorce her husband, no matter how bad he treated her. No matter how bad he treated her. She had to stay. Well, that won't fly. That will not fly today. No, 911 will get you out of that situation. Okay, let me get back. Here's something else. I'm running out of time. One of the things that Jesus taught, again, so that we could see things differently, was over in Matthew chapter 16, verse 13 through 19. Is Jesus trying to see what did they see even when what did they understand about Jesus? And he says, Matthew 16, 13 through 19, when Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? And they said, some say that thou art John the Baptist, some Elias, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He saith unto them, but whom say ye that I am? And Simon Peter answered and said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven. Verse 17, let me read it out again. Jesus asked the question, who do people say that I am? And Peter rose and said, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered, or then said to Peter, and said unto him, Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. That was another way of Simon Bar-Jonah is another way, Simon, son of Jonah. Okay. For flesh and blood hath not revealed this unto you, but my Father which is in heaven. In other words, God has shown this to you. God has taken the blinders off of you and actually shown you who I am, that I am the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And then he goes on to say in verse 18, and I say unto you that thou art Peter, which is another word for rock, and upon this rock or upon this truth, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Jesus said, the church that I'm forming, I'm not talking about the organization that I'm forming. I'm talking about the people that will be following me. Jesus never left any instructions for an organized church. Paul came along later talking about an organized church, but Jesus never did talk about an organized church. He was saying that the church that he was talking about will be based on individuals getting an understanding of who he is and the things that he taught. And he said, upon this rock, upon this truth, the truth that was revealed to you, that I'm the Christ, the Son of the living God, that's how I'm going to build my church, by God revealing to people what I have taught you. While it's going to be revealed to you an understanding of what I'm teaching you, whether I'm talking to you about your authority, whether I'm talking to you about forgiveness, whether I'm talking to you about healing. You know, that's what Jesus said over in Luke chapter 4:18, when Jesus is basically giving his mission statement and why he's here. Luke 4:18, Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. He said, this is what I'm here for. He was in the synagogue and he was reading Isaiah when he read that. And he said, after he said that, this is, I love talking about this, but after he read that and they closed the book, and he said, this day, what I just read has been fulfilled in your ears. I'm the one that Isaiah was talking about, that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I'm anointed to preach the gospel to the poor. And he said, you just have to see that. You all are blind to who I am. You all are blind to who I am. Jesus was getting in trouble because he was telling them who he was, and they said, we can't see it. We we can't see it. Jesus is constant. Oh man, I don't want to go there. Let me finish Matthew chapter 13 and shut this down. If you like this type of teaching, if this is really helping you, first of all, write me a little note. That helps me. That encourages me that some people are getting help. Hit like, share, whatever you can do to let other people know. That would be a blessing to me. But I believe this is so much needed, that Jesus was teaching people how to love themselves, that we're blind to how to love ourselves. And that's the whole key to loving other people. And that's the whole key to loving God. But we're blind to that. A lot of times we think that we're just supposed to love God and love people. No, Jesus didn't say you love God and love people. He said you love people as you love yourself. And he said the way you love people is your expression of how you love God. Why? Because people were made in the image of God. People were made in the likeness of God. And when you're loving people, it's just like loving God. But you've got to learn how to love yourself. And Jesus was trying to get people to stop condemning themselves, to stop being ashamed of themselves, to stop feeling guilt about themselves, to stop feeling less than other people about themselves, stop degrading and devaluing themselves, and see themselves through, see yourself differently. Man, I come back next week. We got to stay with this. To see yourself differently, to see your situation differently. And Jesus said, upon this rock, come back to Matthew. He says, upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And whatsoever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatsoever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. He says, those are the keys to the kingdom. I'm giving you the spiritual authority to change your lives. But you got to see things differently. See yourself differently. See others differently. This is the transformation that I want you to go through. Look, I'm out of time. I hope this helped you. Man, I really enjoyed sharing this with you today. But I hope this is helping you. And again, if it is, just hit a like. That would bless me. Leave a positive comment. People might disagree. I don't know. I don't know why you would ever disagree about improving yourself. But people are just people. I get that. but yeah. God wants to improve you. He wants to improve your situation. He wants to improve your circumstances. He wants to improve how you look at things. That's how you go from immaturity to maturity, is that you see things differently. You understand things differently. That's what growth is all about. Look, again, I'm out of time. If this has been a blessing to you, subscribe to the Pastor J podcast. That would be a blessing to you. I want to pray with you before we go. And let me do that. Father, just thank you and praise you for all those that have heard your word today, that I've shared your word with them today, that the eyes of their understanding will be enlightened, that they will, that you will show them things differently, and they will see things differently, things that they can do to improve their lives, to make their situation better and the situation around those better, and the people that they come into contact with to make their lives better. Now, Father, I speak blessing over everyone under the sound of my voice. I call them healed. I call them blessed. I say that no weapon formed against them will prosper, that every tongue that speaks against them will be condemned, Father. And in the end, we will give you alone all the glory and all the praise in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Love you all so much. We'll see you next week here at the Pastor J podcast. Bye now.